Van tegnies. Kyk. En Johan, jy's welkom om te begin.
Okay, my skerm sigbaar.
Ek sien hom.
Right.
Mooi en duidelik.
Funny evening. EMC electromagnetic compatibility carries a lot of focus in our hobby. You will see in the practice exams you do, it also carries a lot of weight, because this is the part of the hobby that causes the most frustration, not only for your neighbor that wants to break your windows, but also for yourself sometimes when you can't speak to someone that you want to speak to. So we're going to start the session. Thank you. There it goes. Okay. Electromagnetic compatibility, or EMC, it's a straightforward definition that I've put up for you. Can we just mute mics, please, Henry? Okay. EMC is the ability of electrical and electronic systems to operate safely as intended in their electromagnetic environment without producing intolerable interference to other equipment or being exposed to intolerable interference from other equipment. Okay, so if I've got a radio, it's designed to operate according to certain specifications. So when it gets interference, it is intolerable interference that it's getting. But it can also create headaches for the neighbor that's busy watching the Springboks and the Wallabies playing rugby when I'm busy on HF. So tonight we're going to spend quite a bit of time. I think there's about 20 slides that we have to go through. And hopefully we can get you to remember some of the stuff. This one I've just put in there for recap. I'm not sure when you did propagation, but you did a lecture on propagation already. If we remember, an electromagnetic wave comprises two parts. The first part is the electrical field that is being generated when I radiate RF. And the second part is the magnetic field which I generate, or which is generated when I radiate RF. And the two fields are always 90 degrees offset to each other. Now you'll do, I think you've got antennas to do still. You'll learn about vertical polarization and horizontal polarization. This signal, or this wave that's represented on your screen, is a vertically polarized RF signal. You always look at the direction of the electric field, and that tells you the polarization of your wave. So you can remember that when you do the propagation and the antennas. I think that's coming still, Henry. Is it done already? Yeah, propagation was done last week. Okay. So you should remember it from last week. Okay, when we look at EMC, and this is the two terms which is used in your handbook, and it's also the terms you find used internationally. It's easy to remember. An intentional radiator is a device that intentionally generates and emits RF energy via radiation or induction, such as Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, or your radio transmitter. Sorry. So intentional radiator is something that is designed to radiate RF energy. But when it starts radiating RF energy that's not compliant with the specification it was intended for, then it becomes interference. So the two terms to remember is an intentional radiator is typically a radio which is supposed to radiate RF. The next one we call an unintentional radiator is a device that generates RF energy for its internal operations, but it is not designed to transmit, or it's not supposed to transmit. Your computer is not supposed to be a radio transmitter, although it can be if something is wrong. Printers are not supposed to radiate RF energy. But if something goes wrong, a printer can radiate RF energy. So an unintentional radiator is when the device starts radiating RF energy and it's not supposed to, because it's only supposed to use it internally. Right. Two terms to remember: intentional radiator and unintentional radiator. Now we start getting to the fun part. The interference starts happening and everybody starts shouting. Who's causing the interference? Who's going to fix the interference? Your neighbor is hanging over the wall shouting at you. And then also, what is technically creating the interference is actually the right question that we should ask ourselves. Not who's causing it and who's going to fix it, but what is technically creating the interference. Okay. One of the problems we're sitting with in cities nowadays, and people involved with Wi-Fi communications, etc., is quite aware of this. There's something which we call radio spectrum pollution. And radio spectrum pollution is getting worse and worse as the years go by. Just like plastic pollution in the sea, RF spectrum pollution is getting worse and worse. And the definition to remember, RF spectrum pollution is the straying of electromagnetic waves in the radio spectrum that cause unintended effects on communications or health. Some of the slides will deal with the health issue, but it's important to remember there's also a human factor or a human interference part to EMC as well. Radio spectrum pollution can be broken down into three categories. Natural noise. This is typically what happens with the sun. We know that every day there's explosions on the sun, and sometimes of the year the explosions get more as the solar cycle changes. And then certain times of the year there's very little explosions. But all those things are creating natural noise, which you can't do anything much about except if you're on the wrong side of the earth when it's night. But natural occurring noise is something that happens, and it happens in cycles. Then leakage from devices not intended for radio transmissions. So going back to our definition, unintentional radiation. And then the other one is interference from radio transmissions, intentional radiators. And those are the three things that contribute to radio spectrum pollution. Okay, just a sanity break. Everybody with me? Is there any questions? Hands? Okay. Now we start with the fun part. Intentional radiators. I need to operate my station within ICASA regulations and sound engineering principles. Now, if I look at the things which is important, and we will look at examples if things go wrong where the interference is caused. The first thing we look at is the power levels that we use in our transmitter. We will look at grounding. We're going to look at antenna placement and condition. We're going to look at intermodulation. We're going to look at equipment condition. And then the last one we will look at is diplomacy. So when we look at intentional radiators, these are the things within my ham shack that I have to know about, and I have to be careful that I don't cause interference because of one of these reasons. So what, if we start getting practical, what are these reasons? First thing, yeah, we've got a beautiful waterfall spectrogram of Henry 06 HFE's radio station at home. And he's quite a good radio amateur. He's only radiating RF energy in the area where he's supposed to. So in other words, in this case, his radio is tuned to 14.2 megahertz, 20-meter ham band, and he's talking, and all he's doing is radiating a narrow band of RF energy. The rest of the spectrum is beautiful and clean. This is what your signal should look like. But now we've got ZS6 Charlie Bravo that stays in Krugersdorp. He believes in putting as much modulation on his carrier frequency as he possibly can to try and reach the other side of the world. But what he doesn't know, the more overmodulation I apply to my carrier, the less chance the people have of hearing me on the other side of the world. So too much modulation causes distortion, it causes harmonics, it causes all sorts of wonderful things. And if you look at this waterfall spectrogram, he's supposed to be transmitting here somewhere. But everything going to the right-hand side is just little peaks occurring as the harmonics of his transmitter is radiating RF energy where it's not supposed to. Okay. So let's say Henry is busy having a nice conversation at this exact frequency with somebody else in Cape Town. And ZS6 Charlie Bravo in Krugersdorp starts transmitting and splattering the whole spectrum. Poor Henry can switch his radio off and forget about his QSO with a guy in Cape Town. So if I transmit, well, let's go the other way, sorry. Sorry. That's what we want to look like on our spectrogram. And most of modern radios actually will display it for you on the screen when you're busy transmitting. This is not what we want to look like when we transmit. So when we talk about an intentional radiator that radiates too much RF, this is what it would look like. The other thing to remember about power levels as well, if I want to talk to, let's take Henry as an example again. I want to talk to Henry which stays 10 kilometers away from me. I don't have to run a kilowatt transmitter to talk to Henry that's 10 kilometers away from me. I can most probably use 1 watt or 2 watts to talk to Henry which is 10 kilometers away from me. So change your power level to suit what you're trying to do. If it's not necessary to run high power, don't run high power. Okay. So that's around power levels and overmodulation, but this is the net result of overmodulation. Next one, grounding. We will touch on grounding again on one of the latest slides on unintentional as well. But grounding should not be confused with the earth pin on your wall plug. That's not grounding. That's earthing. Okay? Grounding is when I physically connect my radio equipment, my coax lines, I physically connect them to earth, to the ground. And we'll look at it in a later slide. But why I do it? So any unwanted signals which is floating around on the cable or is floating around in my transmitter get short-circuited to earth. So it cannot radiate. It can't float is another term they call it. The grounding in my shack is absolutely vital so that any fault or any stray RF energy that's floating around can be short-circuited down to Earth, and it can't be radiated to cause interference. Okay. The next one we will talk about causing interference is antenna placement. Here we've got, who's talking here? Shall we give this one to Marty? Marty is busy talking on her transmitter, blah, 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 blah. But in our modern cities, everything is built on top of each other. So my neighbor's lounge is likely to be 3 meters away from my ham shack on the other side of the wall. And his DSTV dish is also 3 meters away from my antenna. So although I may not be radiating incorrect energy, in other words, I may not be at fault for radiating energy to interfere with his television reception, the close proximity of my antenna to his TV dish is such that I'm causing interference on his TV. And he can't watch the Springboks play the Wallabies or the Proteas play India in the cricket. And he's going to come shouting at me. So when I start putting up antennas at home, I need to be cognizant of where I put them so that it's not in close proximity of my neighbor's antenna. It's also not in close proximity of my family. Now, normally, both the HF and VHF and UHF communications we do, it is quite safe if you are a couple of meters away from the antenna. If I start operating at a kilowatt of RF energy, then that distance becomes bigger and larger. And there is formulas in which you can calculate the safe distance that you have to be away from a radiating antenna not to cause bodily harm. So I have to look also where this antenna is going to be placed so that it's not right next to the window where my daughter is sleeping every day, every night. I have to look at things like that so that I don't cause bodily interference. Okay, then we get to the next part of interference. There's a wonderful, long married couple in amateur radio. This couple is called Mr. Corrosion and Mrs. Oxidation. And what does Mr. Corrosion and Mrs. Oxidation do? They create a chemical diode in my circuitry. Okay. Now, if you go back, take your minds back to the mixer lecture we had. All mixers have got a diode in somewhere. Somewhere in the mixer is a diode. What's the purpose of the mixer? It adds or it subtracts two different frequencies together. So now this wonderful connector I have, in between the one connector and the other one, I've got a chemical diode in there. And the chemical diode creates all sorts of harmonic frequencies for me because it is subtracting and it's adding everything together that it can find. So this is not what my connectors and my radio equipment should look like because it's going to create headaches for me. I just want to go to the next one. Okay. So what do I mean when I say it creates a diode? I'm transmitting on frequency F1. On the other side of the street is a church. And that church has got Vodacom to rent the corner of the church property and put up a big Vodacom cell tower. So now I have my transmission frequency. I've got Vodacom's transmission frequency. And because of the chemical diode that's created by the corrosion or the oxidation, I can have all these multiple frequencies creator generated. And let's say this frequency 2 times F1 plus F2, that frequency is exactly the LNB frequency that my neighbor is using for his DSTV dish. I'm going to have a problem because the neighbor is not going to be able to watch the cricket. And it's because I've created a product, a mixer product in my antenna installation or in my radio. Could also be in my radio. This frequency could also be inside my radio. If we go back to transmitters, our lecture of transmitters, what did we say? All transmitters, the amplifier has got harmonics. And I use a low-pass filter to stop the harmonics from exiting the transmitter to the antenna. But if I've got a PC board, let me try and go back to this one. If I've got a PC board fault in my radio, it means that at this point in my radio where the chemical diode exists, other way, I've got my transmit frequency, I've got a harmonic frequency in my radio, and I can also generate all these multiples of options available to me. Okay. So remember, chemical diode, mixer, multiple frequencies causing interference. Now we're very fortunate there's computer programs on the web where you type in these frequencies, F1, F2, and it comes back and it gives you all the different products which you can have, even up to higher levels, 5th, 6th, 7th level order products that you can have if you mix those two frequencies together. So if you start worrying and you think that the problem may be because of corrosion or oxidation, just go and search the web and you'll find a program that can calculate all these frequencies for you, and you can compare that with what is happening around you, receivers, radios, etc. around you and in the neighbor's house. Okay. So I've added this just for clarity. So how do we avoid Mr. Corrosion and Mrs. Oxidation from visiting me? You get something which is called self-vulcanizing tape, which is fantastic stuff, man. It's really lekker stuff. So after I've connected my connectors together, I would wrap it with self-vulcanizing tape, all the way from the insulation on the coax, all the way to the other side where the insulation of the coax is. Okay, so I'll wrap it and make sure that you stretch the vulcanizing tape well so that it vulcanizes to each other and we overlap with about 50% overlaps. The problem with self-vulcanizing tape is that the sun and the weather does affect it over time. So what you do is you find yourself a good quality insulation tape. Not the one that you buy 10 rolls for 10 Rand on Timo from China. You find a decent UV stabilized insulation tape and you wind it over the vulcanized rubber tape. Oh, somebody joined. Okay. So you wrap it over the vulcanized tape. This is just a cutaway after you vulcanized and protected your connector. After years outside in the wind and weather, if you take the vulcanizing tape and insulation tape off, this is what it should look like, and not like this. Okay. This is the tip trick. The other one which I want to put here, because you are heading now for your career as a radio amateur, be very careful of second-hand equipment. If equipment looks like this picture, I would tell the guy to go and sell it as scrap metal at his local scrap metal dealer. I would not buy it. Okay? Because, sorry, let me just switch the DMR off. Okay. If the radio looks like this on the outside, The inside will most probably look like this, where Mrs. Oxidation has been at work oxidizing everything on the PC board. This is what a PC board should look like, not like this. So be careful when you start looking at equipment after you've passed your exam. There's a lot of sharks out there. The guys will tell you, hey, mint condition radio, man, one owner, non-smoking radio amateur. They'll tell you all sorts of tricks to get you to buy their scrap. Be very careful. It shouldn't look like this. Okay, then the last one on intentional radiator. Please rather be friendly with your neighbor. If he's got a problem with interference, solve the problem. Don't fight with each other. You may end up him inviting you for a sirloin steak and a Windhoek. But rather be polite with your neighbor and fix the problem than ignoring it. Okay, that's intentional radiators. Are there any questions? Complete silence. Okay. Very other way. Unintentional. My station can suffer from interference from unintentional radiators. Now remember what we said, an unintentional radiator is something that uses RF energy internally, but it is not supposed to. It's not meant or designed to radiate it, but it does, and that causes interference. Typical things that happen: switch mode power supplies, LED lights, solar systems, electric fences, power line communication, computer equipment. They are all excellent unintentional radiators, believe me. And you may hunt and hunt to find them. Intentional is normally you creating a problem for somebody else. Okay, normally, not always. You can create a problem for yourself as well, but intentional radiators that cause interference is typically you creating a problem next door or a problem somewhere else. Unintentional radiators are normally not always, but normally something within the boundaries of your property, which is creating a problem for you. Okay. Intentional, it's you creating the problem. Unintentional, it's something within the boundaries of your property, most of the times, that creates a problem for you. Okay. That's the difference to remember. Just a picture, and I made a mistake here. These two drawings of the capacitor and the cable should have been the other way around. When I look at unintentional interference, it can be caused by conduction. In other words, my computer's power supply is conducting or is putting RF energy on the wires in the conduit in my house. So it runs from the computer, runs through all the wires to the DB board, from the DB board to my receiver in my ham shack. Okay, so it's conducted on the wires running in my house. It could also be DC cables. I can have, for example, a DC to DC converter on my transmission or in my ham shack. And I can also put RF energy on the plus and minus wires that are going to my receiver. Okay, so conducted, because it's conducted on wires, this is typically the E field, the electric field of my wave that is conducted. Capacitive, the same scenario. Capacitive coupling is normally the E field, which is coupling to my receiver via the cabling. Okay. Inductive, this is the magnetic part of my EM wave, of my electromagnetic wave, that is inducing the interference on my receiver side. Could be this cable, which is magnetically coupling into this cable, which feeds my receiver. Okay, so it is magnetically coupled. It's not conducted like this one, it's magnetically coupled. And then the last one is radiated interference. Also, the magnetic portion of my electromagnetic wave. I mean, I've seen somebody putting their internet Wi-Fi modem right next to his HF radio, and he cannot understand why he's got such a high noise floor on his HF radio. But he's got Wi-Fi radiating 15 centimeters away from his antenna connector on the back of his radio. You are looking for trouble. Okay. This is just another drawing version of it. Capacitive, conductive, inductive radiation coupling. This is normally a bugger to find. Not always easy, but there's ways and means to find the interference that causes. Everything I'm giving you tonight is basically in your manual. It's just sometimes in other words, but if you read the manual after this lecture, you'll see that, what's the time? Everything is in your manual. Sorry, other way. Okay. One of the biggest culprits. Yes, the fan. Good one, that Peter. One of the biggest culprits of modern life is LED globes. Incredibly efficient, low power usage, wonderful stuff. Actually bad for your eyes and also not good for spectrum pollution either. Why? I've got 220 volts coming to the globe from my municipal supply or my solar system. LEDs operate typically around 2 volts DC. So I've got to convert 220 volts AC into 2 volts DC. So all these globes have got some form of they call it a driver, but some form of a power supply or a power converter in that changes the 220 volts AC into 2 volts DC for the LEDs itself. These things typically switch for efficiency reasons, switch at a couple of megahertz. And the cheaper the globe, the worse the radiation. The more expensive the globe, typically the better the radiation that is coming out of the globe. So if you've got an interference problem, first thing you do is switch off all the LED globes, each and every single one in your house. See if the noise disappears or not. If it disappears, then you start turning back on the LED globes one after the other until you find the culprit and you take it to the garage, smash it with a hammer and go and buy yourself another one. Okay, so LED globes is a big unintentional radiator of RF energy. It does it either magnetically, so in other words, it radiates electromagnetic waves out of the casing, because these things are always, nowadays, they are all in plastic housings. So the plastic is not a shield, so it radiates electromagnetic energy out the plastic, or it conducts interference back onto the wires, back to my DB board, back to my ham receiver. So it can be conductive interference, or it can be radiated interference. Power supplies, switch modes, the wonderful modern age of switch modes, cell phone chargers. Every single thing has got a little switch mode power supply. Engineering-wise, it was a fantastic way of reducing the weight and the cost of power supplies by going to switch modes. These little black boxes you find that gives you 12 volts to power something, they've all got these things in. And in 99% of the cases, these things are not shielded. They're unshielded. So they radiate beautifully, or they conduct interference back onto the wires going to my DB board, back to my receiver. So that's one of the problems with switch modes. And also the thing is that happens, I don't say it's always true, but there's a reason why Samsung charges 250 Rand for a cell phone charger, and the guy standing on the street corner outside Menlyn is charging 25 Rand for a cell phone charger. Obviously, the company making that 25 Rand charger is going to put as little components into the charger as possible, where Samsung has done a bit more of engineering work, and they've put more components in their charger to make sure that it doesn't interfere, doesn't pollute the spectrum. Okay, so that's typically problems we have with chargers. Then, anyway, next one is electric fences. Oh, wonderful. Every time that electric fence arcs, my HF radio's needle goes ballistic to full scale and back. Electric fences was not designed to spark. They were designed to generate a static, very high DC voltage on the wires. But what happens is either my wife's plants or the neighbor's wife's plants start growing, and they start touching the electric fence wires. And not long after that, the electric fence starts arcing every single time you charge the wires. Tick, tick, tick. Okay, so you go and inspect the neighbor's electric fence or your own electric fence. And if you find the place where it's arcing, you speak to your neighbor, or if it's yours, you turn it off and you fix the problem so that it stops arcing. This picture, I was looking for an electric fence picture, but this one intrigued me. This thing that the guy is standing in is called a Faraday cage, which is also in your manual. A Faraday cage is something that completely isolates the inside from any electromagnetic energy on the outside. And you can see this poor guy is standing in the Faraday cage, and all these wonderful spits and sparking is hitting the cage, but it's not hitting him. So this is a good example of a Faraday cage that he's standing in. So if you read that page in your manual on Faraday cages, think of this poor guy standing there. Nothing can penetrate the cage. He's well protected. Everything goes down to earth. Okay, this is another good example of why I ground my equipment. If I have a good and decent ground, this fault or the sparks that are being created get short-circuited down to earth. Can't go anywhere. Okay. Cage yourself inside, I guess. Yeah, it's a bit difficult to do.
Well, iron rebars also work with the walls to cage yourself in. It doesn't want to even allow Wi-Fi through at the end of the day.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, then switch modes again. This is what well, not always, but this is what a better switch mode power supply looks like. You can see it is inside a metal enclosure, and that metal enclosure prevents the radiation of electromagnetic energy or RF energy out to the free space. It can still radiate, or it can still interfere by conduction. So in other words, here where my live and neutral is connected, there can be conducted interference that goes off with the cables to the DB board and to my receiver. But the magnetic wave part of interference at least will be kept inside this housing. This is a typical one that I also wanted to show you for equipment. I, for example, bought quite a nice SDR software-defined radio, but it suffered immensely from interference problems in my shack. So what I did is I bought an RF shielded case, took it out its plastic box that it came with, and rebuilt it into a metal shielded case. My interference gone. My investment in that software defined radio is well protected now. Okay, so that also helps sometimes to shield stuff. Then we get to the one which also may be of interest to the neighbor, depending on what is happening on his side. Your manual calls it a braid breaker, which to me is not exactly a good term, but let's keep with braid breaker. To me, it's a common mode choke. What does it mean when I say it's a common mode choke? When I have a signal running from this connector to this connector, let's take this one as an example. If I have a signal, this is on my antenna and this is on my radio. So the signal coming from the antenna, the inside of the coax and the braid of the coax will be at opposite polarities, okay, and they will not be differentially the same. Okay. If I have interference, and this is one of the criteria of interference, is the induced or the interference travels on the cable, and the voltage on the outside of the cable and the inside of the cable due to the interference will be identical. This is why they also call it a common mode choke. So in other words, if the potential or the signal on both the inside and the outside of my cable is equal, same polarity, same value, which is normally a sign of interference, the common mode choke will get rid of it. So what it does is it runs in one direction. If you go back to the lecture on magnetics, you'll see it runs in one direction, and over here it flips over and it changes direction. Okay. So any common signals coming in will be shorted out, will be cancelled out. But the signal coming in from my antenna going to the radio will go through uninterfered with. Okay. This is an expensive version of it. This is the cheaper versions of it, and this is the really cheap version of it. Okay. So, for example, let's say I'm interfering on the speakers of my neighbor's beautiful audio 7.1 Dolby audio system that he runs on his TV. When I transmit on HF, I induce some reason interference on his speaker wires going to be running between the amplifier and the speaker. You can typically do something like this. I would most probably either go for the ring type or I would go for a couple of these ones together. So I take the speaker lead, I wind it a couple of times through, and it goes off to the amp, goes off to the speaker. In my shack, both my HF radios have all got these common mode chokes on, and it makes about a 2 to 3 S point difference on the S meter reading of my HF radios after installing these common mode chokes right at the back of the radio where the antenna connected. Then in your shack, all 220-volt wires I've got in my shack has got these clamp-on ferrites that gets rid of common mode noise. So every single 220-volt lead, before it plugs into the back of the computer, has got one of these on. The computer monitor screens, before where they plug into the screen, I've got one of these on the 220-volt wire. Right. It stops all those unintentional interferences that are conducted and run along the cables of mine. or the wire of my cable, sorry. Okay, this is common mode chokes, or as they call it in your manual, braid breakers. The reason why the braid breaker comes from is from this inversion of the direction. Okay, now we're back with earthing, grounding. Okay. A good drawing of grounding coming out of an ARRL publication, which you can think of. That's why I say don't confuse the earth pin of my grid or my reticulation in the shack with grounding. That's not grounding. That's typically what they call a safety earth, and it's intended for taking a fault current to earth so that the earth leakage can trip on your DB board to protect you from being electrocuted. This guy has gone quite elaborate. He's taken a 1/2-inch piece of copper water pipe and he's put it all along the wall of his shack, and he's connected everything: transceiver, computer, keyer, everything in his shack is connected to this 1/2-inch copper water pipe. And you don't use small gauge wire, you use proper braid or proper wire to do this connection. Then it goes outside into the ground outside his house, where he's hit in a proper ground earth peg, okay, and he's bonded that to the copper pipe. Okay, that's grounding. For example, you would once a year, I buy a bag of salt, and where all my ground rods are in the ground, I throw a bit of salt when the rain season starts so that I just make the ground a bit more conductive again. I've got a whole mesh of these ground rods on this side, on that side, to try and get rid of any interference or stray energy that is floating around in my equipment. Okay, so that's grounding, not earthing. Earthing is this one here on your 15 amp socket. This is grounding. So what you do is right outside your window where your shack is, you put a proper ground peg, ground rod into the ground. If this part is going to be below the ground, you would paint it with bitumen before you close it up with sand or with ground, so that you keep Mr. Corrosion, you keep him away. He's looking for a place to come and cause havoc. So if this part is below ground, but it's not protected, Mr. Corrosion will find a place to stay after some period of time. Okay, that gets rid of a lot of stray interference in your shack. Sometimes you don't have a choice but to use filters. Right? So filters is another part of getting rid of unintentional radiation or interference. The top, for example, is a high-pass filter. So what does this tell me? This filter will pass 1.8 megahertz and higher. So anything below 1.8 megahertz, this filter would block. Why has the guy done this, or why would he use this filter? A lot of switch mode power supplies used to be in the megahertz and lower range. LED globes used to be in the megahertz and lower range. So any of that interference then gets blocked by this high pass filter. But by normal amateur radio communications is unaffected, because everything above the 160 meter band is passed by this filter. This is one I wanted to show you, for example, is I do a lot of receiving of ADS-B signals. Those that don't know what TSB is it's the telemetry signals which the aircraft transmit when they're busy flying. And they transmit this on a frequency of 1090 megahertz. Now, previously, I was lucky if I could get an aircraft or I could receive the telemetry of an aircraft, not even the Limpopo River, and I couldn't receive the aircraft anymore. Or going towards Botswana, wouldn't even reach Tabazimbi, and I lost all telemetry reception from the aircraft. So I've put in a bandpass filter for 1090 megahertz to get rid of the RF spectrum noise, the pollution. Now I can listen to aircraft well up to past Malawi and all the way to Zambia. I can receive the telemetry transmissions of aircraft on 1090 megahertz by just putting a filter in. Okay, so this is just a very high frequency filter compared to a HF filter on. The other one which is important, certain things you don't put together. They don't work together. So when I'm busy laying out my shack and I want to put cables in certain places, certain cables don't belong next to each other. So I've got to make sure I keep cables separated where I need them to be separated. This goes back to this one. Okay. The inductive coupling. So if I put two cables next to each other that doesn't belong next to each other, I'm going to have inductive coupling and I'm going to have inductive interference. So when I start laying out my ham shack, I need to look at where my cables go. Okay, that's it. Interference. Done. Is there questions?
This is quite an easy topic.
Easy.
Just need to know the origins in essence and what the origins can be.
That
I was
is,
saying,
that's the secret, is to find
Yeah.
the origin of the interference. Once you
Like
know
what
what
the-
the interference is, it's fine.
it's like what I was saying in the chat. Like, what? Don't forget the microwave. Like, if you think about what microwaves radiate, and if you mix that with Wi-Fi and so on, also in the 2.4 gigahertz,
Yes.
very good example of unintentional.
Most of modern interference, if you speak to the guys at Centec, most of modern interference is caused by multiple culprits, if you want to call it that. So in other words, I just want to go back to this one again. This one. This is the biggest culprit of interference nowadays, because there is so many frequencies floating around in the spectrum, polluting the spectrum, that it's so easy to mix multiple frequencies together and to get a product somewhere that causes interference on something else. This drawing has only got two frequencies listed for you, but if you look at some of the other graphs available, they even sometimes talk about 3, 4, 5 frequencies mixing with each other. So you can imagine what the spectrum looks like when you start mixing stuff together. It's really
So one harmonic frequency giving another harmonic off, but that other harmonic is also amplifying another problem, which is just problem with itself as well. And now, where's the actual problem at the end of the day? Yeah.
So the
that can
biggest
be
thing
fun.
is lies in this. Be a good amateur. Be ZS6HFE. Don't be ZS6CB, Charlie Bravo and Krugersdorp. Make sure this is what your radiation looks like. And then look after your equipment. You think these drawings are exaggerated. I've been to hams with problems before where their stuff looks like this. The same with this. I cannot understand how you can take a 25,000 Rand radio and pull it through your arse like this.
No.
Yeah. Look after your stuff. Make sure things like these don't happen. Radiate pure signal, and your chance of creating radiation is very low. And don't be stupid. Don't put your bloody HF antenna 2 meters away from the neighbor's DSTV dish. The two of you are going to reach a disagreement.
As I always just say, keep your footprint small when you're talking about radio in itself. Doesn't matter what radio you're talking about, Wi-Fi, whatever. Keep your footprint small. Don't do more than what just because you can. It doesn't work together.
Okay, then after the last session, I got a brain wave. It doesn't happen too often. I've put now the answers to the questions for you at the end of the chapter. So if you look at the recording from Henry, there's the 42 questions in your book on EMC. I'm busy updating my lectures from before as well with the same table for the questions pertaining to those chapters that I presented. So moving forward, you will have at the end of the recording the answers to the questions in the manual. So Henry, that's it.
Daar sê, dankie Johan. Ek wil net gou nou dat daar ander ouens bygekom het, net weer daai lys gee van die mense wat ingeskryf het, or the people that's been acknowledged by the SARL. Let me just get to that email. The registration list, as they call it. Just to give those people peace of mind that they are on the list. There's a Mr. J.J. King, Mr. J. Morkel, Miss J.C. Robinson, Mr. R. Sylvester, Mr. K.S. van Oldenburg, and then Mr. G. van Skalkwyk is op die lys. Daar's nog nie examennommers nie. There's no examination numbers as yet. The exam closes on the 17th of April. So I will get another update, and after that I will get probably the exam numbers, and you would also get the exam numbers. But those are the people that are paid up and ready to write. And that's my story. I'm going to stop the recording.
Yeah, just before you stop, Henry, let me just put this up one time more, so that it's right at the end of the recording if they want the answers to the questions. I said I'll send you the updated presentations of my other chapters, Henry. And we can just update it on your recordings with the same table for the questions for those chapters.
100%.
Okay. Yep, now you can stop recording.